Lila and John were finally married. They had been together for 6 years and had finally tied the knot. They had been saving for years to buy their dream house, and they had finally found it. It was an old, sprawling mansion with a huge yard, a pool, and a guest house. They could not believe their luck when they found it, and they moved in right away. The first few days were perfect. Lila and John spent their time exploring their new home, planning where to put their furniture, and dreaming about their future together. But things started to change after a week. Lila began to feel uneasy, and John was becoming more and more irritable. It started with small things. They would find doors open that they had closed, or a lamp would be on that they were sure they had turned off. At first, they brushed it off, thinking that they were just being forgetful. But then, they began to hear strange noises at night. They would wake up to the sound of footsteps on the stairs, or the creaking of the floorboards. Lila tried to convince herself that it was just the house settling, but deep down, she knew that something was not right. She started to do some research and discovered that their house had a dark history. It had been owned by a wealthy family who had all died under mysterious circumstances. No one knew exactly what had happened, but rumors circulated that the family had been involved in some kind of cult. Lila tried to talk to John about it, but he refused to listen. He said that she was just being paranoid, and that they needed to focus on making their new life together. Lila tried to push the thoughts out of her mind and focus on the future, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone in the house. One night, Lila woke up to the sound of someone whispering her name. She sat up in bed and looked around, but there was no one there. She thought she was dreaming, but then she heard the whisper again. This time, it was coming from the corner of the room. Lila was paralyzed with fear. She couldn't move. She couldn't scream. She couldn't do anything but listen to the voice. It was soft and gentle, but it sent chills down her spine. It was calling her name over and over again, and she knew that it was not human. She tried to wake John, but he was sound asleep. She was alone with the voice, and she didn't know what to do. She wanted to run out of the room, but she couldn't move. She was stuck, trapped in her own fear. The voice continued to call her name, and Lila felt like she was losing her mind. She tried to focus on something else, but the voice was all she could hear. She closed her eyes and tried to block it out, but it only grew louder. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the voice stopped. Lila was left alone in the darkness, trembling with fear. She knew that they were not alone in the house, and she didn't know what to do. The weeks went by, and the strange occurrences continued. Lila would hear the voice calling her name at night, and she would find objects moved or missing. She knew that they were not alone in the house, and she was starting to fear for her life. One day, while John was at work, Lila decided to investigate the guest house. It was a small building at the back of the property that they had not explored yet. She had a feeling that whatever was haunting their home was coming from there. As she entered the guest house, she felt a cold breeze wash over her. It was eerily quiet, and Lila couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her. She began to explore the rooms, and as she went deeper, she started to feel more and more uneasy. In one of the rooms, she found a small altar with strange symbols etched into it. There were candles and dried herbs scattered around it, and the room was thick with the scent of incense. Lila's heart raced as she realized that this was the source of the dark energy in their home. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around, but there was no one there. She tried to run, but she stumbled and fell to the ground. As she got up, she saw a figure standing in front of her. It was a woman dressed in a long white dress, her hair hanging loose around her face. Lila tried to scream, but no sound came out. The woman reached out and touched her arm, and Lila felt a coldness wash over her. She knew that this was the same woman who had been calling her name at night. The woman started to speak, but Lila could not understand what she was saying. It was like she was speaking in a language that had been forgotten for centuries. The woman continued to speak, and Lila felt herself slipping away into darkness. When John came home, he found Lila lying on the ground, unresponsive. He called an ambulance, and she was rushed to the hospital. The doctors couldn't find anything physically wrong with her, but she was in a deep coma. Days turned into weeks, and John never left Lila's side. He begged her to wake up, but she remained unconscious. Then, one night, he heard a whisper in his ear. It was Lila's voice. but it was distorted, like it was coming from another dimension. The voice said, "They won't let me go. They want me to join them. Please, John, help me." John knew that he had to do something. He went back to the guest house and found the altar. He destroyed it and burned the symbols etched into it. He could feel the dark energy dissipating, and he knew that he had freed Lila from the curse. The next morning, Lila woke up. She was weak, but she was alive. She told John about the woman in the white dress and how she had been calling her name. John finally believed her, and they both knew that they had to leave the house. As they packed their bags and prepared to leave, they heard a soft voice behind them. It was the woman in the white dress, and she was thanking them for freeing her from the curse. Lila and John knew that they had done the right thing, and they left the house, never to return. Years later, they found out that the house had been demolished. No one wanted to live there after what had happened to Lila and John. They both knew that they had been lucky to survive, and they never forgot the horror that they had experienced in their dream home.